1974, Volkswagen finally unveiled the car which would replace the legendary Beetle, a front-wheel drive, water-cooled hatchback styled by Giorgetto Giugiaro and his world-famous Ital-designed studio. It was a time of great upheaval for Volkswagen. They'd remained faithful to the water-cooled Beetle for too long, and there was intense press speculation on whether the new car would be able to live up to its predecessor's success. They need not have worried. The new car was the Golf. From the outset, it was apparent the new car had sporting potential, and a handful of enthusiastic Volkswagen engineers set about producing a sport version. The project had no official backing. However, they soon came up with a prototype fitted with the fuel-injected Audi 80 GTI engine, a 57% boost in power. And after appraising it, the board gave the nod for a limited production run of just 5,000 units, enough for the car to gain Group 1 homologation. The Golf Sport name was dropped, and the new car came to be known as simply the GTI. Volkswagen had created the hot hatch. When they launched the car in 1976, I was news editor of Autocar magazine and was delighted to get the assignment to go to Germany for the first test drive. When we arrived, the normally staid Volkswagen company issued all the journalists with red silk scarves and black leather driving gloves, and we wondered why. We soon found out what the excitement was about. That first GTI was simply stunning. We'd never driven anything like it before. Once we'd been introduced to the cars, it was out onto the German roads and a route that led us to the Hockenheim race circuit. The organisers begged us to be very careful with the Mark I GTI because they were sure, as responsible motoring journalists, we wouldn't take any chances. We were suitably careful. The German engineers were right to be cautious, of course. At the German Grand Prix meeting, they'd assembled a fleet of 22 Sirocco GTIs and invited the Grand Prix drivers to take part in a 10-lap event before the main race on national television. Of course, Grand Prix drivers being what they are, they'd all leapt into the cars and stormed away. The second man hit the first man at the chicane, and the other 22 piled into the back. And dismayed Volkswagen engineers saw their prides and joys being reduced to scrap metal in a matter of seconds. The motoring journalists tend to be a cynical lot, and at a new car launch, everybody compares notes and moans about different aspects of the car after the drive. In the Golf GTI case, I well remember how everybody was bubbling over with enthusiasm for this car. Not just for the way it went, but for the way it handled. You could throw it around to your heart's content, and it always stayed on your side. That original road test car, of course, was a 1600 with a 4-speed gearbox and left-hand drive. The Germans swore initially that you couldn't make a right-hand drive version. The brake servo was in the way, but British conversion specialists disagreed, and quite a few of the early cars were converted. In the end, the Germans bowed to enormous pressure from the UK importers, and they made a right-hand drive version. The cars never looked back in terms of British sales successes. As orders poured in, production targets were rapidly revised, and Volkswagen was soon building 5,000 cars a month. In 1979, right-hand drive cars were introduced to the UK, and in 1983 that 1600 engine grew to 1800 cc's and the gearbox gained another cog. This was the best of the Mark Is, with a power-to-weight ratio of 135 brake horsepower per tonne and a 0 to 60 time of 8 seconds. The GTI was rapidly becoming the icon of a generation. Some things you do forget. I'd forgotten how heavy the steering is without power assistance. The ride slightly choppy on this example with the optional Ronal alloy wheels, which were very popular at the time, and Bilstein's shock absorbers, another period modification. You soon found out if your fillings were at all loose. The other aspect of Mark I ownership that used to infuriate you was rattles in the dashboard. You'd spend your life going round it and wedging it and pushing in rubber bungs, trying to stop that irritating noise. This one is remarkably good. The Mark I GTI has often been called an engineer's car, a unique blend of size, feel and performance. It had a particular appeal, a character that was stamped on the car from the start. Over 500,000 Mark I GTIs were destined to be built by Volkswagen. One man whose fortunes were to become inextricably entwined with those of the GTI was Richard Lloyd, saloon car racer, restaurateur and former press agent for Cliff Richard.
I was coming out of quite a bad season racing an Opel Commodore in 1976. And one Sunday afternoon I was with a mate and we were looking through the Sunday Times. And I remember an ad in the classified section, something like unique car, Volkswagen Golf GTI, ideal for the wife. And so I thought, well, not quite what I had in mind, but I'll go down and see it, which was in East London. And it was remarkably about the first GTI ever imported, I think, left-hand drive. And at the same time, the regulations for the Touring Car Championship or Saloon Car Championship were being announced. And I thought, well, this would make quite a good saloon car. So I bought it not for the wife and took it off the road, threw a roll cage in it and off we went racing.
Literally unmodified?
Yep, completely unmodified. The first year, 1977, it quickly became apparent that it was quick straight away out of the box. So I thought, well, maybe we better do something a little bit more to it, and we tweaked it a little bit, but it was just enough to keep ahead of the Hillman Avenger. So we had great fun, ended up winning the championship class, and of course at that time saloon car racing was quite in its sort of formative years, and Volkswagen then came on the phone and said, "What's all this about you racing a Golf? How can we help?" It was the dream phone call.
Brian Ricketts, a development engineer in the racing preparation business, was soon involved with Richard on the GTI. Now running his own BR Motorsport business in Leamington, he looks back with affection on those early years.
At the time I worked for Broadspeeds, which was up the road at Southampton, and I was a development engineer on the Jaguar saloon racing project. And then that all closed down because Leyland withdrew the finance from it. And then Volkswagen came along with this thing called a Golf, and they wanted to turn it into a racing car. And at the time, the only experience I'd had with Volkswagens was Beetles, you know, the things with a funny noise in the boot. My brother owned one and did all the fancy things to it, and I didn't particularly like them. So when they said they were going to bring a Volkswagen to be tuned, I sort of dreaded it. And then this thing arrived, which was a bright silver 1.6 GTI, and they loaned it me for a couple of days just to run on the road. When I first drove it, I was totally amazed. I'd never driven anything that went so well or handled so well. The 1600 gave 110 horsepower, where at Broadspeed we'd been used to working on Ford RS 1600s, which had about 106 horsepower. They were 16 valves, and there was this little Golf with only 8 valves, and it was just a fantastic performer.
And then you got involved with Richard Lloyd in the racing side.
Yes, what happened, we raced a car while I was based at Broadspeed, and then Richard got his first bill from Ralph Broad, and that took most of his sponsorship money for the year. So we decided that I would move away from Broadspeed, and we found a unit at Silverstone, and we formed GTI Engineering.
Because of Brian's expertise, we majored really on the engineering side. He was, and still is, I'm sure, a brilliant tuner, and we extracted more power. I tended to focus on the aesthetics, trying to get the cars to look better, and that spawned the whole thing of the body kits and the seats and the steering wheels and everything else. It was a unique product, and it had such a sort of, it was in a way understated, and therefore was completely different to the sort of flash cars of the time. And I think people embraced it as a real, fun hatch, something they could really have fun with. And sure enough, the South Kensington set took to it readily, and we were in the early days swamped with requests to make their already fast GTI faster.
How much would somebody spend on a GTI in those days?
Oh, I think it was not unusual for somebody to spend upwards of £3,000, £4,000, and bearing in mind the engine alone would cost them around £2,000. It's incredible to think that in those days, 20 odd years ago, that people were paying that much money to have their cars improved.
How difficult was it to tune the GTI in those days? I mean, you had quite a good base to work from.
Yeah, the problem was we found early on that when you tried to tune the 1.6, it was already a very well-tuned engine. When it came to the 1.8, they give it a bit more sophistication, a few more cc's, but it only had another 2 horsepower.
So there was a potential there to do a lot more with it.
Well, with the 1.6, it was very well tuned. You could gas flow the head, put a sports cam in it, and it would only give about another 15 horsepower. The only way to make it go any quicker was to increase the capacity.
And you started doing 2-litre conversions?
Well, we started off at GTI Engineering. We converted the 1600 to 1850cc. We basically copied what they were doing on the continent, buying parts in from Germany. And then when they brought the 1.8 out in the Mark 1 form, we started doing 2-litre conversions. And that's how it's gone through the life of the GTI. We do something better. Volkswagen brings something else out that's better, and we try and beat it. We're up to the VR6 now with trying to get 230 horsepower out of them.
Tuning has always been an art form, the shaping, polishing and altering of cylinder heads and manifolds to achieve the optimum gas flow both in and out of the engine. Those who practice the art most successfully tend to keep their secrets close to their chests, but even in today's world of sophisticated engine management systems, emission restrictions and the pursuit of economy, their skills are as effective as ever they were. BR Motorsport's Jim Nyston.
A lot of the secret is getting the gas flowing right. Attention to detail, particularly around the valve seats and the valves. And the shaping correct.
It's beautifully polished in here. Is it necessary to get that finer finish?
The shine doesn't really matter. You've got to get the shape right.
I mean, manufacturers spend millions and millions of pounds in development. Why do they get it wrong and you guys can improve on it?
That is because to do something in production like that is very time consuming. which they couldn't afford at mass-produced quantities.
So it's hand working that makes the difference?
Yes.
What was the first 1600 head like?
That was a flat, non-combustion chamber head. The chamber was in the piston, and the porting is still basically the same as an 1800.
But you can't do anything to the chamber if it's in the piston.
No,
that's set, isn't it?
That's set.
So the work has to be on the inlet tracts and the exhaust
Yes.
outlets.
Yes.
And then when the 1800 came along, an easier head to work with?
Yes. The ports were slightly bigger, the valves were bigger, there's a bit more space inside. You have a combustion chamber which you can work with. It's an all-round better cylinder head.
Do you tend to go for bigger valves?
For road conversions, it's not a good idea. You tend to lose out the bottom end with the bigger valves. But for a race engine, yes, you really need something to make it breathe at the top end with a long duration camshaft.
Because the lads out there think a wild camshaft is the answer to all their problems, but very often it's not.
No, it's not. Long durations and high lifts, you're going to lose out at the bottom end.
And that's really the appeal, or has always been the appeal of the GTI. It's got such pulling power
That's
from low
right,
down.
it's flexibility, particularly on the 8-valve engine. It tends to be a lot more flexible than the 16-valve is.
Almost from the start, enthusiasts took the GTI to their hearts. In Germany, GTI rallies attracted thousands of owners who participated in huge social events. In Austria, the famous GTI Treffen, where owners from 7 countries formed a 6-mile queue of GTIs during a parade of their cars. They compared notes on customizing and modifying, bought accessories, or just stood round, polishing and talking interminably about the loves of their lives. But why did the GTI create such an immediate and powerful effect on owners?
Compared to the cars that I'd driven previously, starting with the Austin 7, MGTCs and TR3s, TR4A, and then the ubiquitous sort of 60s saloons. There came, then in the 70s there was this extraordinary sort of little buzz rocket, which was just terrific. And I remember the first year of racing was really the one, because it was such a great thing, front-wheel drive, and all the others were Toyota Celicas and Hillman Avengers, and it was a real great season. We had a thoroughly good time. And we then went on to develop a Group 2 version, which was great fun. We had Derek Bell driving it and Barry Sheen, all sorts of people. So the last years in the 70s were great fun with the Golf.
When it first came out, it was the first hot hatch sports saloon car, really. I mean, there'd never been anything like it. Anybody that was anybody had to have a GTI because it would outrun most things on the road.
And not content with just polishing them, enthusiasts wanted to drive their GTIs in competition. A good 1600 Mark I takes around 17.2 seconds to cover the standing quarter mile in factory trim. The 1800 Mark I could knock a full second off that. And with a little tuning, the times go tumbling down. After 8 successful years, Volkswagen decided they could improve on the Mark I GTI. So in 1984, along came the Mark II. While it took its styling cues from the Mark I, Mark II was no facelift. Every panel was new and it was longer and wider. It needed to be. The rear seat knee and elbow room had never been generous in the Mark I. Styling was less angular than the Mark I had been, edges were smoother and more contoured, and it was aerodynamically more efficient.
When they stopped the Mark I, we rushed out and bought a Mercedes 190, which was the trendy car in Germany at the time, to start tuning that, because we thought that when the Golf 1 went to Golf 2, there wouldn't be the interest. But we were wrong.
In the 1983 RAC Rally, Kalle Grundle had astonished the rally world in his Works GTI with an 8th place overall. So what better for the Mark II than a showcase rally programme in the UK? Now, exactly 10 years ago, I was making a video programme for Volkswagen Motorsport. The subject, the Volkswagen Junior Rally Driver Team. 4 young drivers from England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland were given Works drives in the British Rally Championship. And the winner got a Works drive in the following year's RAC.
Yeah, the car's running very well. I've had it up the road this morning and everything feels good. Feels very quick, engine, brakes and everything's fine. So hopefully it should go well.
Davidson and Dave Nicholson in their Golf GTI.
And the other team drivers?
Well, I think today is a sort of a bedding-in rally, to be honest. Get used to the car, set the brakes up.
Looking forward to it very much. Slightly nervous, but no more so than usual.
Callum had reason to be nervous. He broke a drive shaft on the start line and had to limp to the end of the first stage. But Simon was already showing the team's potential. He was really flying and already up with the leaders.
It's gone very well. The conditions have suited the car, I think, and we were up to, apparently, one reporter said we were up to about 5th or 6th overall. So we've had a little bit of gravel on the stages since then, and things might have changed.
For Callum Guy, though, problems. He was proving very quick, but at a price.
At the start of a stage, it was quite dry. It was quite a good surface. About a mile in, there was one corner just changed tyres, and you couldn't really see. It wasn't white, and just went straight on into a ditch, and there were 2 huge logs in the ditch. We hit one of them head on.
Simon Davidson was looking good. A first-time Group A winner, perhaps.
Well, no, you don't make predictions. You wait till get the end of the event and then you start talking about it if you like, but we'll not predict.
Simon dominated Group A and finished 6th overall. All 4 members finished the rally, some in rather unusual style. And it wasn't a good day for our camera crew either. Nevertheless, as the season progressed, the GTI team kept up their high profile, dominating many of the events. Simon Davidson was soon riding high in the championship stakes. A service halt for the cars, and a problem for the team manager. One of our boys is missing, and from the look of this description, it's going to be expensive. Guess who?
Well, we're halfway through the stage. It's a long stage. The first part was very slippery, just very loose, and it started to improve about 2 miles back. It was all fast, very flowing, and all 4th, 5th gear. And really, we came down to here, and it doesn't look bad because you can see the next corner, but it actually goes about 60 degrees right. So we came into it in 4th gear about 80 odd miles an hour and just almost got it back with the power on, but it just dug in and just rolled and rolled and rolled.
The local tractor drivers know this corner of old, and they're always lurking vulture-like on hand. Still in the north of England, the Quip Forest Rally came next. Simon Davidson knew that if he won this one, he could clinch the title with one event still to come. Robin Phillips, lying 2nd in the championship, was determined to keep up the pressure on Davidson, but was destined to have an incident-packed run. Callum Guy had the spare Rally Golf for this event and a different co-driver. He had initial trouble with brakes, but was concentrating on showing that he could finish with the car intact. Simon duly won, and Volkswagen took the championship. So at the end of the season, did champion Simon Davidson think the Volkswagen Junior Rally team had been a success?
I think it's been an excellent idea, yes. I mean, there's obviously 3 other drivers as well as myself, and they've all shown extremely good progress through the year. Some of them have been very quick on occasions. So I think that sort of 4 good people were picked initially, and they've put in 100% effort. And I think Volkswagen have been well rewarded at the end of the year. Obviously, we've won the championship, but also all 4 cars have figured very strongly right throughout the year. So it's got to be good for the Volkswagen name.
The junior rally team had demonstrated forcefully that Mark II was no watered-down version of the Mark I. But there was still a demand for more power, and the hot hatch opposition was at last catching up. So in 1985 they introduced the 16-valve. I was sent to Germany to drive it for a Volkswagen dealer video report that year. In retrospect, perhaps a trifle generous over the flexibility of the new engine. The 16-valve is a very different kettle of fish. It's not just a GTI with a quicker engine. I think it's quite important to get over the fact that this is a very different motor car. This 16-valve, 139 brake horsepower engine is not a rorty top of the range power pack. It's a smooth, very well developed and very carefully engineered unit. You can put this thing in 5th gear at 1,000 revs and you can put your foot flat on the floor and it will just pull smoothly and gently away right up through the rev range. Of course, if you want to snap down a couple of gears and zap the throttle open, it goes far more quickly than GTI ever did, as I found out earlier today around the country roads near the forests. And it certainly needs its ventilated front brakes and its strapped down suspension and revised damper settings. Even so, it's not a rock-hard racer. It's a very smooth, very fast GT motor car. I think that it's going to do an awful lot for the GTI image, and it's going to give a lot of other manufacturers a great deal to think about. In February 1992, they launched the Mark III version of the Golf GTI to instant acclaim from the motoring press. And not just the press. Dealers reported an instant response from the GTI enthusiasts. Their demonstrators were soon working flat out. When the car was launched, we lent a new Mark III GTI to tennis star Annabel Croft, who was competing in the Volkswagen tennis tournament that year. What did she make of it?
The trouble with tournaments is there's an awful lot of hanging around waiting for your game. So I'm going to take a quick break to put this Golf GTI through its paces. Golf GTI has of course become a modern motoring legend. At first they said they'd only build 5,000 to qualify the car for racing. Now they've built well over 1 million and the car has become a legend in its own lifetime. And as a former Golf owner, I've always lusted after the GTI. This is the latest incarnation of the GTI, the Mark III. Well, I feel really at home in here. Controls are firm and positive, the seats are really comfortable. I like the interiors, they're very smart. Holds the road really well. You really feel like you're driving it along. In fact, it's just like a trip down memory lane for me.
Like the Mark II, the Mark III was styled in-house by Volkswagen designers, but they would have been mad to throw away those distinctive styling cues laid on by Giugiaro. So the new car was every inch a Golf GTI, and it wasn't long before the world of rallying again beckoned. In 1995, Volkswagen entered a lone Mark III in the British Rally Championship. With the GTI engine capacity up to 2 litres, a 16-valve version had been launched in 1993, and it proved the ideal base for a rally car. It earned itself a regular top 5 place in the championship rounds and capped a strong season with a fine 4th place on the Network Q RSE Rally. For 1996, Volkswagen put up a full works team for the season, a fine reward for SBG Sport in Daventry, who'd built and campaigned the car for Volkswagen.
The advent of Formula 2 rallying was a godsend in terms of us getting back into rallying in the UK with the Golf, because Formula 2 was just absolutely made for the Golf GTI, and along with quite a lot of other cars. And it was a wonderful opportunity again to actually demonstrate Golf amongst its peer group cars, which is extremely important in marketing terms for Volkswagen.
And not just in the UK. In Finland, the GTI had finished second in the 1995 championship, and over the summer of '96 rapidly became the car to beat. By the end of the season, their rising Finnish star Tapio Laukkanen had the championship well and truly tucked up. In 1995, the team had been getting around 210 brake horsepower from the 2-litre 16-valve GTI engine, a considerable hike from the standard car's 150 brake horsepower. Mated to a 6-speed H-pattern gearbox, there was clearly more to come. Over the winter of 95-96, the engine was developed further to around 220 brake horsepower, and a new 7-speed sequential gearbox from Sweden was installed.
The money situation is always the big problem with any motorsport activity, but we're in a much more comfortable position from a budget point of view this year perhaps than we've been for a long time, and the arrival of Sony with us as one of our main sponsors I think indicates the level of interest that companies like they have in this type of sport activity. And we've got some other fairly high-profile sponsors, Revolution Wheels, who are joining us for the first time, and they are using rallying now to relaunch their product in the marketplace. So people are taking a great deal of interest in the British Championship, and hopefully we're going to deliver the goods for them.
So how do you set about building a works rally car? The Mark III Golf GTI is a good start, but you need much more than that. Steve Black explains.
We normally take a body shell from the factory, which is obviously without sealer and any of the parts. It's what we call a bare metal body shell. We then fit a roll cage to it, a T45 roll cage, to keep it as light as possible and strengthen the body shell in the necessary parts, and obviously add a safety aspect in case of accidents.
And you're developing and designing and building parts here from your experience?
Yeah, of course. We're not as advanced as McLaren or ProDrive, but in a smaller kind of way, yes. That's exactly what we do here.
What sort of components have you designed here?
Specifically for this car, we've come up with a front suspension upright. We had problems with the ones supplied from Germany, so we decided to go our own way. It's quite a big venture. You have to draw it up and design it and get it made, and any mistakes you make, of course, you have to start all over again. But we ran that all last season very reliably, and are very pleased with it. And now we're actually getting sales from abroad for those parts. And the Germans are actually homologating parts for us, so it's quite good.
Third man, Ashley Blencorm, 27-year-old privateer rally driver from Louth in Lincolnshire. He started rallying the hard way, building his own car from scratch in 1990. Now he's part of the team, but why is he wielding his own spanners?
Volkswagen were keen to run 3 cars on the British Championship, and they have the 2 works cars for the 2 Finnish drivers, and I was keen to use a Volkswagen. I've always been a bit of a fan of German cars, and the time with SBG Sport and me with the Audi comes along, they said, well, you know, we could maybe do you a deal on a Clubman spec car, with just a slightly lower tech car to the works ones. But you'll have to build the car yourself, or not have to build your car yourself, to try and reduce the costs. I've come down here, I've built my own rally cars before, so I thought I'd come and do it myself, and it's really good. It's a lot of work though. Huge amount of work.
What did you start off with?
Basically, it was a bare body shell and a huge box of bits. Volkswagen have been doing or making available kits for people to build Group N rally cars, and you get everything that you need standard part-wise to build a Group N car. But we're building a Group A car, so obviously there's quite a lot of bits left over. Every single standard part that's gone on the car has got to be modified in some way. There's absolutely nothing that fits. Everything's just got a little bit of difference here, or something you just have to cut off there, like the dashboard to make it fit around the roll cage has to be cut out, and the list endless.
Is this going to be as powerful as the works cars?
Not quite so powerful, no. There's a few little differences in the engine. The works cars have got some new parts for this year. Mine is very similar to last year's engine, but just using a few more standard bits. But it should get close on to 200 horsepower out of it. It should be good. It should be a nice
And what
car.
sort of gearbox are you running?
Just a 6-speed H-pattern gearbox, similar to a sort of a normal road car gearbox, but obviously with the extra gear.
How long have you been working on it now?
It's been a month so far, and we've got 7 days till scrutineering for the rally, so I think we'll be okay. We've got a few bits left to come, but it should be all right.
The sorry skeleton of London's Battersea Power Station echoed to the snarl of rally exhausts early in 1996 when the Mobile 1 Top Gear British Rally Championship was launched.
Welcome to you all. Welcome especially to the members of the media who are here, and welcome and thank you to the motorsport people from manufacturers, Ford, Peugeot, Honda, Skoda, VW. A very warm welcome. We're here to celebrate the launch of the Mobile 1 Top Gear British Rally Championship for 1996. Rallying's got it all. It's got thrills, it's got spills, it's got it in spades.
Tapio was looking forward to the coming battle.
Now I have been driving Volkswagen for 2 years, and it's been one of the best cars that I have ever driven.
What do you think are your chances in the British Championship?
I'm very confident that we can get a very good results. I mean, this car has been very reliable. It's very good to handle. We have good tires, very good team.
And then there was a chance for the journalists to experience a works rally car on a special stage.
It's all very much a lot of luck out there when you start and get onto the stages and start to do the actual rally. But we're fairly confident we've got a good mixture of car, driver, team, the whole thing. We're going to win the British Rally Championship. There's no two ways about it.
There is a category for amateur Formula 2 in the British Championship, and so my prime objective is going to be trying to win that. But there's some very, very quick drivers in some very good cars, even in the amateur status. So it's going to be tough, but we like a bit of a battle.
The first event on the calendar was the Rally of Wales, and for this event the Welsh hills were shrouded in a thick blanket of fog, making things very tough for the drivers. Both Tapio and Jyrki were soon setting some stunning stage times. In fact, Laukkanen proved himself virtually the only man capable of touching the championship class victor of the rally, Gwyndath Evans. The 26-year-old Finn tied on times with the fleet Welshman on 2 of Friday's special stages, and throughout the first stages was a consistent top 3 runner. Teammate Puhaka surprised many championship regulars with his pace, and Ashley was looking for amateur class honours. With no experience of forest stage rallying, limited testing time and not having rallied a 2-wheel drive car for 10 years, Jyrki didn't expect to be so competitive. But for Ashley, the end of the road came all too soon. He burned a hole in a piston, and that was that. But as night fell at the end of the first day of the Welsh, both works cars were still delighting regular rally watchers. Unfortunately, Laukkanen was to retire from second place with engine problems. He damaged an oil cooler on some rough ground on the very first stage of the rally. It had been fixed, of course, but the engine sustained some damage and it let go on the 10th stage. Laukkanen was bitterly disappointed, but at least he felt he put up a good show, and the signs were excellent for the rest of the season. Teammate Puhaka lost 9 minutes through minor ignition problems, but fought his way back to 8th place overall, giving Volkswagen 5th place in the Manufacturers' Championships. So, on to the second round, the grueling Pirelli International. All three drivers were on their mettle to make a mark on the fearsome border stages. The Scottish is notorious for a ban on pace notes and wrecking. The driver really has to trust his navigator to call the bends from an Ordnance Survey map. Tapio and his co-driver rose to the challenge and were soon in the top three slots. Suspension trouble was looming though. It sidelined them early on in the event, and the yellow Golf finally blocked the stage. Jaki Puhaka posted second fastest times twice early on in the stages, and this only his second UK rally appearance. He was blitzing the 2-litre opposition. The crew had to change a gearbox early on in the rally, and that cost him a minute in road penalties. So at the start of the fearsome 24-mile-long Hundershaw stage, Volkswagen's Flying Finn really had the bit between his teeth. A spin in between log piles in mid-stage cost Yuki a lot of time, so he really had to attack the last three stages. On the 11th and final stage of the rally, he was 20 seconds ahead of the opposition to record fastest time and consolidate his fourth place overall. Ashley Blenkhorn brought his privateer car home ninth and claimed fifth in the Autosport Amateur Award standings. For the third round, the rally circus moved across the Forth Bridge to Perth for the Scottish Rally. A psyched-up Tapio was out for blood and blitzed into the stages, winning 4 of the first 8 in truly spectacular fashion to take the Formula 2 class lead. But mechanical gremlins were soon back at Tapio's elbow, and his crew had to change the gearbox on stage 6. His crew fought to change the box within a tight time schedule allowed, and an impatient Tapio blazed away again. But soon the new gearbox was giving trouble, and by stage 9 a disappointed Tapio's charge was over. Tapio's teammate Jaki Puhaka was once again quick and neat, although he did take the odd shortcut. He was proving a regular top 5 stage time contender in the 650-mile marathon, fast turning into a benefit for the Finns. Volkswagen's third man, Ashley Blenkhorn, seemed set for a top 10 finish himself, till an off put him down the field. Undeterred, Ashley fought back to 14th at the finish and 4th in the amateur award rankings. And Jaki's third straight point-scoring finish in 4th place means he remains second overall in the Drivers' Championship, with Volkswagen third in the Manufacturers' League. Just before the Ulster Rally came a surprise for the Volkswagen camp. Alistair McRae, reigning British champion, joined the team, taking over Puhaka's seat for the Ulster. The least said about that Ulster round, the better. Both drivers were out early with gearbox failures, but McRae had been quick enough while the car lasted to ensure a drive in this year's RAC Rally. In September, the rally circus moved to the Isle of Man for the Manx International. 25-year-old Manxman Martin Rowe was Tapio's teammate, and he rapidly put his local knowledge to good effect. Early on, his gearbox gave trouble, but his crew made a lightning change and kept Martin on schedule. Tapio was destined to put in the drive of the rally in the yellow Sonny car in an incident-packed event. Early on the first day, he too ran into gearbox trouble, but again the team's used to slick work in gearbox changing, and he was soon on his way. Tapio clipped a bank and tore off a front wheel on that first day. Isle of Man banks tend to be unforgiving, but his team had the corner rebuilt and the Flying Finn on his way with the loss of just 9 minutes. Martin Rowe was proving a pace setter from the start, consistently posting top 3 stage times, clinching Volkswagen's third place in the manufacturer's stakes. Tapio had fought back from 21st to 6th place before a drive shaft problem hit just 2.5 miles from the finish, putting him back to 9th. Nevertheless, he had the satisfaction of being crowned 2-litre king in Finland's national championship, which Volkswagen's been dominating all season. The RAC proved exceptionally punishing. Both Alistair McRae and Swedish ace Jörgen Johansson went out on the first day, but Austrian Raimund Baumschlager brought the new 280 brake horsepower kit car home, 10th overall and 6th in the two-wheel drive class. And Ashley posted a fine 20th overall and 8th amongst the privateers. Now Volkswagen looks forward to 1997 with 2 works cars and team leader Alistair McRae tackling not only the British Rally Championship but selected World Rally events. And Ashley continues to campaign his privateer GTI.
Now the Mark III is sort of coming into its own. I suppose they've been out now for 4 years. And there's a lot more kit getting available for them. I mean, we start building VR6 supercars for some people who just like to use them on circuits. We've got a customer booked in a month's time that is having a VR6 supercharge, and that will be around 300 horsepower. But it is one of the new VR6 synchros.
With its narrow-angle V6 engine of 2.8 litres, the VR6 is in some ways the ultimate Golf GTI. It was launched with the Mark III, and with 174 brake horsepower on tap, its performance is stunning. A top speed of 140 miles an hour and 0 to 60 in around 7 seconds. It's not so much the out-and-out performance that impresses, though the figures speak for themselves, as the way the VR6 performs. It'll go from 60 to 80 miles an hour in 4th gear in just 6.4 seconds. But more importantly, will do 30 to 50 miles an hour in the same gear in the same time. That's real smooth power. Now, one of the drawbacks of powerful front-wheel drive cars in the past used to be excessive wheel spin, especially when moving off in the wet. Now, not only was it embarrassing in terms of attracting attention, it was also potentially dangerous because you didn't move away as quickly as you anticipated. But with the Golf VR6, there's a solution. It's fitted with electronic traction control. Now, it senses when one wheel starts to spin faster than the other. This might happen if the 2 front wheels have unequal grip. Then it brakes the spinning wheel until it's rotating at the same speed as the other wheel. Like all the best systems, you don't know it's there and you can't feel it doing its work, except you do notice you never get one wheel spinning in the VR6. Almost since the start of the Beetle in the 1940s, the Carman Company has been building a convertible. And when the Mark I Golf came out, they were quick to establish their own version of the car. The first Golf convertible made its public debut at the 1979 Geneva show, and from the outset there was a GTI version. The company built considerable strengthening into the body shell to compensate for the removal of the steel roof panel and included the distinctive central rollover hoop. By 1985, the convertible Golf was being manufactured at the rate of over 25,000 a year. Because of the tooling costs, the convertible stayed in Mark I guise and skipped a Golf generation, the Mark III convertible emerging in 1993. The new Golf convertible offered a wider opening boot lid, a power hood option that folded flatter, giving better rear vision, and a bit more shoulder and legroom for rear seat occupants. As the Mark I had done before, the Mark III convertible became a fashion icon. Now this is the latest incarnation of GTI, the anniversary model, a limited edition car built to celebrate the 21st birthday. It's amazing how this anniversary version of the GTI brings the memories flooding back of that original Mark I over 20 years ago. I think that's because it's black. It's a black GTI with red trim, and that's exactly like the original. And on the inside, the black theme is carried on with red stitching around the inside of the steering wheel rim, the famous golf ball gear lever, and red stitching on the leather round the gear lever shroud. And even the handbrake gets black leather treatment with red stitching and a red button on the end. I don't remember that from the original. Silver instruments with red needles and these vivid slashes of red seat belts against the black interior with GTI inscribed on the fabric. One very obvious change over all those years, the in-car entertainment is now far more sophisticated. And instead of an on-off knob with volume control and a tuning knob, you now get a CD player. And although things are a lot more sophisticated today, well, the basic feel of the car is very much the same. Taut handling, tight, square on the road, you sit down behind the wheel and the car just goes when you floor the throttle. This anniversary is a 16-valve version, and of course the 16-valve engine goes as well as it ever did. Tremendous unit, thrives on revs and plenty of power low down in the rev range. And of course even today, where there's a bit of moisture in the air, you can rely on those big fat tyres on those BBS alloy wheels to grip whatever the road surface and whatever sort of corner this sinuous country road throws at you. And those huge red calipers peeping through the spokes of the BBS alloys are linked to a sophisticated anti-lock system now, something we didn't have with the original GTI. And again, you're confident that this car will be on your side, whatever happens. So what happened to GTI engineering?
Well, Brian and I had a very fruitful 15-year, I think, relationship. But all, like many relationships, they have, some have an ending. And I was distracted really by the international motor racing set, and I ran my own team for 10 years, and that took its toll on my time and my enthusiasm really for the job. Brian is a great engineer. I was more of a instigator and a marketeer, and I could see better opportunities in the racing. So I sort of ignored it, took my eye off the ball a bit, and eventually Brian left to set up his own business. And the business is still going on, but I'm not involved in it at all.
At every major GTI gathering, the concours competitions create enormous interest. Standards are rigorously, some would say ludicrously high. People will spend 5 nights before a concours polishing the underside of their cars, the inside of the wheels, the suspension, the brake components, wheel arches, even the inside of the exhaust pipe. And when they get to the event, they start all over again, removing all traces of what is often a long road journey to get to the site. Under the bonnet, it's the same story, and people get extra points for all the original factory stickers on the correct places. There are classes, of course, for all types of GTI, original and highly modified cars. Needless to say, the bodywork, the glass, the upholstery and the carpets must be spotless too. But the results of all these labours are simply stunning. If you've never seen a car presented to this sort of standard, detailing they call it, you'd be amazed. Not just by the devotion, the worship almost, that's been lavished by the anxious owner, and often his family too, but by the sheer beauty of finish these guys achieve, considerably glossier than a brand new car sitting in a dealer's showroom. And there's no shortage of admirers. Once they've finished their handiwork and the trauma of judging is over, owners just sit back and revel in all that attention. Are you surprised that it's sustained for 21 years?
I am actually, because I thought when Peugeot came in with the 205 GTI, I thought, hang on, this could really knock our business for 6. But Volkswagen were always just one step ahead of the game. I think they always came up with just that little bit of something. And of course the build quality, integrity and everything was always superb. And I must admit, I'd love to get my hands on an original GTI now and compare it with what's on offer today.
I can remember once speaking to one of the motor writers from Autocar. I said, is the GTI that good, or is it just that I'm prejudiced because I work on them? And he said, well, basically when we run them around bank circuits and things, bits don't fall off them. And we find this with working on them. You have to be unlucky to get a bad GTI.
And so the story comes up to date, but it's by no means over. 116,000 Mark I, Mark II and Mark III Golf GTIs have been sold in the UK alone. In the years since its launch, it's gained more engine capacity, more valves, more power and the option of more doors. Other manufacturers adopted those magic 3 letters for their imitations. Most have faded into history. The true GTI, however, goes onward and upward. Sales in 1997 are expected to hit 1/4 of all Golf registrations, and the resale value of the cars remains among the best in the class. The GTI is as strong today as ever it was. Happy 21st.